to the January 9th meeting of the Jefferson County Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, the board conducted an executive session for the purpose of discussions that might lead to the appointment of an individual employee, and no action was taken. At this time, if you would, please join us for our traditional moment of silence. Thank you. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, would like our vision statement read by Board Member Horne.
All Jefferson County.
You may want to turn on the mic.
Oh, sorry. All Jefferson County public school students graduate prepared, empowered, and inspired to reach their full potential and contribute as thoughtful, responsible citizens of our diverse, shared world.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the organization of the board and the election of the chairperson. Before we begin that, I do want to convey my personal appreciation and thanks for the honor of being your chair over the past year. Contrary to popular belief, I'm still the chair right this very moment. I didn't resign. Contrary to erroneous reporting, which hopefully now that we have an education reporter from that particular station, by the way, welcome, Kevin. We appreciate looking forward to accurate reporting. So I want to say an appreciation to thanking my colleagues for electing me last year to this position. I also want to share some appreciation to my colleagues at work, my full-time job, for their indulgence in letting me take on this extra role and responsibility over the course of the past year. It's been a challenge. I think under usual circumstances, it's a challenge to balance board member duties, family, and work. As chair, it's even more so. So I've been very fortunate to have the support of my colleagues at work and the organization that I work for in this process, and I just want to convey my thanks to them, as well as to my friends who hopefully will now get to see me maybe. I can reacquaint myself to some of my friends who haven't seen me over the past year. And also I want to say thank you to my family who have supported me during this endeavor. And especially, my wife and two boys, and specifically my wife, because when I was reelected in 2016, I had to make a promise not to run for chair. I broke that promise, and she was very understanding with that, circumstances being what they were at the time and unexpected results. So I appreciate her support, which there's no way I can do this without. And also, at this time, it's just really important for me to be able to step down from this. I have some family issues I want to be able to attend to, and I just don't have the bandwidth to be chair and deal with that at the same time. And obviously, family is very important to me. And also, once again, want to thank my colleagues for this opportunity. Before we turn it over to her, I'd also want to give special thanks to Vice Chair Wilner. I've relied upon her to provide extra counsel and another viewpoint to be able to see issues. I think your strength in numbers and having another person there to be able to see issues and see them from a different point of view and through a different lens has been, at least to me, very invaluable. I do want to ask you a question before we move on. Are you interested in remaining in board leadership? So I'm asking Vice Chair Wilner if you're still interested in remaining in board leadership.
I'm willing to continue to serve as vice chair if that's the will of the board.
Okay, I just wasn't sure about that, so I just want to confirm that. And to that end, let me go ahead and go into the process of selecting our board chairperson. The organizational meeting of the Board of Education of Jefferson County is convened in accordance with KRS 160.160, which requires boards of education to elect a chairperson and a vice chairperson for terms fixed by the board not to exceed 2 years. Board policy, BCA, requires that this is done annually at the first regularly scheduled board meeting held in January. Therefore, the officers so elected shall serve a one-year term or until their successors are elected and duly qualified. So as chair, I will call for nominations from the board for a chairperson to serve serve a one-year term. After all nominations for chairperson have been made, I will close nominations. I will call for a vote on the candidate nominated by a show of hands. The votes will be taken in the order in which the candidates were nominated. At the conclusion of the voting, I will declare, assuming a candidate has a majority, the individual receiving the largest number of votes to be elected chairperson. The newly elected chairperson shall similarly conduct the election of the vice chairperson. With that being said, and as board chair, I will also say that I have the ability to make a motion, which I will. My motion is to make member Diane Porter chairperson of our board for this coming year. Is there a second? Second made by member Kolb. There's a second for that. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing that there are none, since there's been a motion and a second, is all in favor of electing Diane Porter as chair of the Jefferson County Board of Education for the coming year? Say aye. Aye. Motion is unanimous. Congratulations, Ms. Porter. You are our new chairperson. If you don't mind, if we can keep our seats and we'll change seats during our recognitions, I would appreciate that. So I'm going to turn this over to you, and then I'll sit over there once we get done with recommendations or recognitions.
Do you have the agenda sheet and all that?
We are.
Thank you very much. No, I don't need a gavel. I believe in them. At this time, we're going to call for nominations for the position of vice chair. I do have some comments to make, but I would like to get our vice chair nominated and elected at this time. So is there a nomination for vice chair? Ms. Horne?
I nominate Dr. Wilner for vice chair.
Okay, is there a second to the nomination? All right, second, almost called you board chair. Board member Brady. Any other nominations? All those in favor of Dr. Wilner becoming vice chair of the board, please raise your hand. Okay, it's a unanimous vote. Congratulations, Dr. Wilner. I don't usually make comments, but this isn't the usual world right now, so if just bear with me for just a few minutes. There are a few things that I think that I feel like that I need to say, and hopefully you will understand why I'm saying them after I get started. First of all, I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to serve as the chairwoman of the Jefferson County Board of Education. I'm honored. I appreciate your support. And when I call, please answer the phone. I'll just be, whenever I call saying we need help, please answer the phone. We're getting ready to celebrate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King on Monday, and there were some things that I wanted to say about Dr. King as I lead into some other things. Dr. King was a frequent visitor to Louisville, Kentucky, being here in 1960, 61, 64, 65, and 66. His brother became the pastor of Zion Baptist Church. On March the 30th, 1967, he spoke with Muhammad Ali. And he said to him, we are victims of the same system of oppression. On March the 30th, he was here and spoke at the U of L Brandeis School of Law. Derby Week 1967, he was here and he spoke about open housing. It may have been the last visit he made to Louisville before he was assassinated in 1968. I bring that up as we embark on a new year to continue the work of educating our children. I would like to remember a man that believed educating all children with equity and compassion was the key. On Martin Luther King's final public visit to Louisville in May 1967, he spoke about an open city in reference to open housing. Before speaking, a rock was thrown at him. He picked up that rock and took it to the podium. His comment from the podium was, upon this rock we are going to build an open city. Today that's relevant to me because as a board, from the rocks that are thrown at us, we are going to have a strong Jefferson County public school system. Upon our rocks, we will continue to build a foundation of education that is challenging, enriching, and equitable for all students. I would like to personally recognize my colleagues for your JCPS work. I have asked all the things that you're doing other than coming to a board meeting, and Mr. Brady currently serves on the KSBA Board of Directors. Thank you. Board Member Duncan is chair of the JCPS Policy Committee and KSBA Advocacy Conference, Local School Board Member Advisory, and the Achievement Gap that is task force from KSBA. Thank you, Ms. Duncan. Board Member Geese is working with us while teaching school and coming in and serving on our Policy Committee. Thank you, Board Member Geese. Board Member Horne currently is serving and chairing the Finance Committee and has several different subcommittees from the Finance Committee. So Board Member Horne, I thank you for your service. Board Member Kolb, he co-chairs the facilities with me and policy with Board Member Duncan. Dr. Kolb, thank you for your work. Dr. Lisa Wilner has been serving as our representative to Louisville Promise, and that entails a lot of meetings and travel. So Dr. Wilner, I would like to thank you for your work. I'm doing that because sometimes people forget that we are humans. Sometimes people forget that we put a lot of work into what we do for the Jefferson County Public School System. It is important for this board to show this community that we are a united board headed forward with children on our mind every day, providing a quality education for every student in the Jefferson County Public School System. I am committed to that. I have been committed to that before I came to this Board of Education. This board will work as the collective unit doing the right thing for students in the Jefferson County Public School System. Now, just to make sure everybody's paying attention among my colleagues, very quickly, 30 seconds, I want you to say what inspires you about serving on this Board of Education. I didn't give them a homework assignment last night because I knew it would be too long. 30 seconds, what inspires you about being on this Board of Education? Mr. Brady.
Very simply, kids. My kids, my friends' kids, or the friends of my kids, my friends' kids, just the children of our district.
Okay. Dr. Wilner?
Our students and their families for their engagement, the teachers and everyone who supports the work that the teachers do every day in our classroom.
Okay. Dr. Kolb?
I've been reading some John Dewey lately, and he believed fervently that education was the most important thing to the functioning of a free and democratic society, and I don't think there's any institution more important than the school in a free and democratic society, and it's a tremendous honor and responsibility to get to have an impact on that.
I'm inspired by our students that I see in our classrooms. I'm inspired by the teachers, I'm inspired by the principals and the administration, and then also the people that I'm working with, like on the finance committee, and all of the community members that are giving of themselves for the children. There's so many in this community, whether it's collecting donations, volunteering in our schools. It is amazing how this community is showing up for our children.
Mr. Geese?
The advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the greatest protector of true liberty. This is a quotation on the back of my business cards and a quotation in my classroom. I teach United States government and history, and this quotation was uttered over 200 years ago by the founder of, the framer of our Constitution, father of our Constitution and President, James Madison. For me to be a 26-year-old public school teacher and have access to mount a campaign, to run for this seat, to serve my district, to be a public servant, and to have the right and the ability to do that in this wonderful country that we all call home, that's what inspires me.
Thank you. Ms. Duncan?
I'm also very simply inspired by the hope that I see in the eyes of the kids that I've worked with over all these years, and the commitment that I see in the adults who work with them, care that they share with the students that they work with, and that's, to me, everything.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Duncan. I did this again so you could understand why we do what we do and with the devotion that we do it for the kids of the Jefferson County Public School. And Dr. Polio, I will not leave you out. I realize you're not a board member, but I know you are most inspired by our students. So if you could just give us the 30-second version of your inspiration, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Over the past decade, nothing has bothered me more than when a student, I feel, is not engaged in school and the school process. And I've always felt we have way too many of them in Jefferson County Public Schools and across America. And so it has been a mission of mine to increase student engagement so that every student feels a belonging to a school, is engaged in the school process, and in the end is passionate about something, inspired, and the outcome is a successful student. So for the past decade, I know at a minimum that's been a goal of mine is to improve that.
Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to serve with this Board of Education and with Acting Superintendent Dr. Marty Polio. Would you please give them a hand? Thank you. Now, moving on to the agenda, I know how to pay attention, and I will say, in case anyone has not heard before, we are going to have a brief executive session at the end of this meeting, so we're going to stay on task, we're going to stay on the agenda, and we're going to adjourn at the appropriate time after we finish our business. At this time, Ms. Terry Robinson will do our recognitions and resolutions. Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Board Chair Diane Porter and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this evening we begin the recognition of Dupont Manual High School girls cross country team who won the 2017 Kentucky High School Athletic Association Class 3 Cross Country State Meet Championship. The team also competed and won second place honors in the Nike Southeast XC region, a 12-state competition, and qualified for the Nike Cross Nationals meet in Portland, Oregon. The girls finished 19th in the nation there. They were the first team from a Kentucky public school to ever qualify for Nike Nationals. Dr. Polio, Board Member Diane Porter, and Assistant Superintendent Brad Weston, please come forward to extend congratulations to these outstanding athletes. Joining in the recognition is Head Coach Tim Holman and Assistant Principal Vicki Letty. I also like to ask the parents of these outstanding athletes to please stand to be recognized. Parents. Thank you. Next, we have the honor of recognizing Norton Elementary School, who was named a National Blue Ribbon School by the U.S. Department of Education. The designation recognizes public and private elementary, middle, and high schools for overall academic excellence or progress in closing achievement gaps among student subgroups. Dr. Polio, Board Member Stephanie Horne, and Assistant Superintendent Joe Leffer, please congratulate Principal Marcella Minogue and Assistant Principal Emily Iliff. We are so very proud to recognize Melissa Weedman for being selected to participate in the National American Speech Language Hearing Association Leadership Development Program for school-based professionals. The program seeks energetic leaders who are motivated to influence professional issues in speech, language, pathology, or audiology. Participants are selected through a highly competitive application process. Melissa will participate in a year-long program and will develop a leadership project at the culmination of the program. Dr. Polio, Board Chair Diane Porter, and Dr. Alicia Everett, please come forward to congratulate Melissa. Joining in the recognition is Director of ECE, Dr. Scott Hooper. Please come forward. I also like to ask Melissa's husband to stand to be recognized. He is here with us celebrating our outstanding accomplishment. Would you please stand? January is National School Board Recognition Month. The Jefferson County Public School District is extremely honored to recognize our distinguished board members for their outstanding leadership, dedication, and contribution to JCBS students and staff. Dr. Polio, please come forward to thank and recognize our board members for all they do for JCPS. Board members, if you'll please come forward. Dr. Polio and members of the Jefferson County Board of Education, this concludes our recognitions for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson. Appreciate that very much. At this time, I'll accept a motion to receive the recognitions for this evening. Is there a motion? Ms. Horne, seconded by Board Member Geese. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We take a little break at this time for those that need to go home and do homework or just tend to your business, whatever you'd like to do. Again, we would like to congratulate you for your work. Keep up the good work. Thank you very much for being here tonight. We'll take like a 3-minute break. Thank you. What'd you say? No, I said a 3-minute break. No. No. Yeah, but I don't need, you can, I mean, I don't, you can leave that the word is. I know. Okay, well, I mean, I'm not gonna, go ahead and take it down.
I'm doing great. How are you? It's good to see you too. Thank you.
Ms. Duncan.
Yes.
Nice to say hi. How you doing?
I'm doing great.
Doing well.
How are you?
Good.
It's good to see you.
Great to see you.
I'll
You
be
look
over
great.
there to see you.
Hopefully gonna be gone before you are, but hi, how are you? How you doing? Good, good.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw Ruth.
Glad to see you tonight instead of the last time I saw you.
I know. I saw Ruth yesterday. We had lunch.
Yeah,
And James
yeah.
and I had lunch yesterday.
Yeah. She came out and listened to us play the other night. and
Oh,
everything,
good.
And Paul and everything. And we had all
Very good.
the 5 remaining guys from the last version of the band were all there the other night.
Oh, that's
It was so-
wonderful.
It was great. So,
Oh, that's
so
wonderful.
Scott and I are gonna keep playing and doing our thing.
No, that's right. That's wonderful.
Feeling good?
Yeah, I feel great. Thank you.
Good. Glad to see you.
Good to see you, Todd. Second reading. These even state law recognizes.
At this time, I would like to call us back together so we can move forward with our agenda, please. Is there a recommendation to approve the meeting agenda this evening? Dr. Wilner, second. Did I forget something? Minutes come next. I'm sorry. Me that does not hear well.
I thought we had to amend it because we can't make decision and we didn't make any decisions in executive session. So if we're going to make a decision, aren't we supposed to amend it? Because it's informational only.
Mr. Millen?
I don't think there's a decision. I think there may be an announcement later in the meeting, but I don't think that requires a board vote.
Ms. Horne, are you good for us to move on? Sure. Okay, thank you. So the recommendation to approve the meeting agenda, okay. Dr. Wilner, seconded by Dr. Kolb. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Recommendation to approve the minutes of the previous meeting. That would be December the 12th meeting. Is there a motion? Dr. Kolb, seconded by Mr. Brady. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure at this time to introduce Superintendent Marty Polio for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Chair Porter and board members. As you know, this is our first meeting back from our break, the conclusion of the first half of the year. And as I did with all principals, to ask them to reflect on their first half of the year with their faculty and staff, especially on Gold Day, to highlight areas of celebration, things that have gone well, and to also areas of growth that are needed in the second half of the year, or changes that might take place. We would like to do the same thing, and so I wanted to take this time to do a little bit different than my other superintendent reports and discuss some of the areas of accomplishment during the first half and some of the areas of growth. So over 6 months ago, I began in this position. We've made it halfway through the year. I'm proud of the accomplishments that the team has made. And first of all, I want to thank such a great team of committed people that have worked so hard for kids of Jefferson County, as we talked earlier. So all of this work goes out to the cabinet, the staff, and all the school staff and board members. And so I just wanted to highlight some of these. Obviously, we have had significant challenges throughout the first half of the year. I think we've worked to meet them head on in every instance, and we'll continue to do so as we move forward. So I did want to highlight some of, as I reflected back, and some of the great work that has taken place I'm very proud of. And I want to start with huge increases in our commitment to deeper learning, which you guys signed on to in almost 3 years ago now, I believe, with Vision 2020. And I believe staff will talk about how deeper learning has really is beginning to take off in our schools. And we are having some schools that will be model schools for deeper learning. And so I want to thank our instructional team behind Dr. Coleman and her work. We have seen like exhibition nights of learning in many schools throughout the district, increased passion around all our principals around deeper learning movement. We have also had deeper learning grants given to schools so they can fund the work that they are doing. And in the coming months, we are going to be featured in a story by the Buck Institute on deeper learning work here in JCPS, which is, I believe, the #1 training organization in this country for deeper learning and project-based learning. So exciting work going on around deeper learning. We think that will continue. Implementation of our universal screener and map assessment for all K-8 students and some 9th grade students to assess reading and math proficiencies has been a huge improvement for us as we work to drive instruction interventions. This week, we are beginning the second round of map testing. It began yesterday. Schools will now be able to measure growth amongst their students in this second part. And we want that to drive instruction and intervention. And when a student moves from one school to the next, that data follows them so that the next school can begin those interventions right away. Huge jump for us. Increased commitment, as I said, I've always said, to improving culture and climate amongst all stakeholders in JCPS. The passion and inspiration, we believe, is work that is taking place right now. Have a lot of work to continue to do in this. As you know, for the first time, we implemented many comprehensive school survey in October and saw growth in those areas. We're very proud of it. The full comprehensive school survey began yesterday, and that's with all stakeholders, parents, teachers, students. So we would encourage all of our stakeholders to take advantage of our comprehensive school survey as we continue this work, because this is going to be multi-year work. Proud of the commitment to equity in our district as we opened up the California Community Center satellite office, working to serve parents throughout our district. We'll continue that. Also bringing on a new position of diversity and hiring specialists with Ashley Duncan as we work to improve our minority hiring throughout the district. You know, we focused a lot on organizational coherence, and we worked to identify even those that have been identified for us, deficiencies that have occurred from prior years with management in prior years that include, not limited to, OEA report, Head Start Corrective Action Plan, and our KDE Corrective Action Plan. We'll hear more about Head Start, but recently KDE has commended us for the work that we have done to address these issues. We fixed the OEA report. These have been challenging things to address and not easy, difficult on our schools, and I don't want to minimize how challenging some of this work has been, but we are committed to ensuring compliance with all laws and regulations in JCPS, and we're going to meet that no matter how long that takes and how much work we have to do. And I just want to compliment our staff that has taken on these corrective action plans head on, worked extensively, and our schools, who some of them have been painful, but have worked hard to make sure we are in compliance with everything. Created a critical office and central office around Director of School Choice. Cassie Blousy is here. Stand up so we can see our new Director of School Choice who joined us. Welcome. She will be an important part of training our board members when it comes to application for charter schools and making recommendations and informing us on policies and regulations. We've had significant growth around two important initiatives, Louisville Promise Partnerships and Academies of Louisville. We're really proud of that work. I believe those are going to be models that other districts will come visit us. We have had growth and development around the Du Bois Academy, which will open in August. Proud of what we've done right now. We've got a principal in place who's working hard on that. Real commitment to increase communication with all stakeholders, starting with me, but with our cabinet and all of our schools also. And then finally, it was released just this week a new principal pipeline program that identifies 20 future principals to train and work with. So there's additional things to that, but we feel that's a lot of accomplishments in a 6-month time period. Areas of growth, and we want to make sure we do this. We are working significantly to develop every student's backpack of skills so that they are transition ready. So we start with kindergarten ready, middle school ready, high school ready, and finally college ready. And a student's backpack that we're going to work with our board members on at the retreat will include literacy and numeracy. We are committed to making sure that every kid and every student has those skills necessary, but also the success skills that are necessary for a student and a person to be successful in the world, such as collaboration and creativity and persistence. And this is the way that this work is going to be grounded in deeper learning so that we make sure deeper learning is systemic in all of our schools and not just our model schools. So we are excited about this work. I believe this will be a model throughout our country. We are going to work with teachers, parents, board, central office staff to develop this backpack over the next month. Continue to improve our work around support for schools, especially from central office. We're launching a campaign in the weeks to come around customer service and how we can do that better for both schools and for parents. We're going to have some expectations surrounding customer service that every employee in Jefferson County will wrap their arms around. Continued focus on developing a North Star for JCPS, central office, and for schools, the mission that we want everyone to know about. Organizational coherence will be important in this second semester as we look to take a look at the organization of central office and how we are coherent. Continued work around climate and culture. That's many years of work, but we're going to continue that work. And finally, continued work around improvement in facilities, student assignment, budget and finance, policies, and continued growth in superintendent, board processes, and relationships. So we have work ahead of us, and it's not limited to that. Continued corrective action plan and big hurdles ahead of us, but I'm proud of the work that has been done, and I once again want to thank our team. And as we started in August with our administrators, and did not expect this to take off, but the saying that has become so popular, we want that to continue throughout JCPS for all 175 school days. I love my job. I'm really, really good at it, and I'm going to save your child. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Polio. Moving on to the agenda, persons requesting to address the board regarding action, information, or consent items, there are none. There are, moving to the next item, persons requesting to address the board regarding non-agenda items. There are 12 speakers, and as soon as I can find the speaker list, we'll get started. I know it's here someplace. So just bear with me just a minute, please. I've seen the speaker list. Yeah, I saw it.
Get a little copy.
Thank you. I'm also looking for my phone. Thank you, Angie. It pays to have a backup list. So starting with our speakers for this evening, there's a statement that I need to read about our speakers, so let me do that first, and then we will start with our list. In accordance with Board Policy 01421, the Board expects that persons who have signed up to address the Board will limit their remarks to the subject that they have listed at the time they signed up, that their presentation will not include any defamatory or abusive remarks about that subject, and that they will present their remarks in a manner that is consistent with the orderly conduct of the meeting. Also, in accordance with Board policy, the Board reserves the right to limit, extend, or terminate discussion on any subject. Speakers before the entire Board are not allowed to use props, displays, or other objects during the presentation. However, the informational handouts may be given to the Assistant Secretary to the Board, Anji to the right, for distribution prior to or following the meeting. Each speaker is allowed 3 minutes to address the Board and may not share these minutes with any other speaker. At the end of 2.5 minutes, a bell will sound once. You will then have 30 seconds to finish your statement. At the end of the 3 minutes, the bell will sound twice, indicating that your time is up. The superintendent will look into the speaker's issues and, if necessary, represent the Board in following up or recommend action to the Board. The full Board policy concerning public participation in open meetings is available for viewing on our website and at our sign-in sheet. So starting with our first speaker this evening, we have speakers, and our first group of speakers are Nabari Jackson, Damon Sanders, and Kolb Ritter, and they are talking to us about school vouchers. Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. Would you tell us who you are first, please, sir?
I'm Damon Sanders.
Okay, thank you, Damon. Thank you for being here.
Hello, I want to speak to the Board today about school choice. My name is Damon Sanders, a 6th grader at Olmsted Academy North. We want to speak about JCPS should include students in the ongoing school choice issue because it is an issue that impacts students' learning and success. From our PBL research, we found evidence that states homeschools do not always challenge students with talent plus drive to make it at top colleges. This shows access can impact students' learning because we have a choice in going to Olmsted. We are able to be challenged and pushed. We know we have many good schools in JCPS, but we feel that students' voice is left out in this conversation. This is why we are asking you to create a committee of students for students to share their voice about school choice and the schools in our community. Thank you for letting me speak with you.
Thank you so much, Damon. Thank you for being here tonight. Nabari Jackson. Is Nabari Jackson here? Okay. Okay, and Kolb Ritter is not here also? Yes. Okay, so what we would like to say to all, thank you very much for being here this evening, and you did a great job. Thank you. Our next speaker is Yvonne Rivera. Yvonne Rivera, welcome. Thank you for being here. Would you press the green, the button right in the, yes ma'am.
Oh my.
Oh, yes. Happy New Year, new equipment.
I'm not slick with the tech. But anyway, my name, I'm sure you're tired of hearing, my name's Yvonne Rivera. I'm with Westport TAP. And I was not at the facilities meeting yesterday because I was having a lumpectomy for breast cancer. So if I sound a little dopey today, they gave me some really good drugs. But the reason I'm here is, first of all, to thank you that I was told after the facilities meeting that we would be going to South Park Tap, a much bigger facility where hopefully we can grow back to our regular size, and to implore the board to make sure that we can now get all the girls that really want to go to this school. One of the guardians of our school is one of the people speaking tonight, who will tell you how difficult it was to get his niece into Westport Tap, how it literally took years. That should never, ever, ever happen. Obviously, I'm really committed to my school. I had surgery a little over 24 hours ago, but I'm here to beg on behalf of my school. It's so important to me, and I hope it's just if it's 1/4 as important to you as it is to me, you'll make sure that every girl has an opportunity to go there, because it's not just for her, it's for her babies too. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here. Our next speaker is Pam McMichael. Pam McMichael, to talk to us about removal of police and SROs in the schools. Welcome, Pam. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Superintendent Polio, Chairwoman Porter, members of the board, and members of the community. My name is Pam McMichael, and I live in School District 6. In my 64 years, I've been a high school teacher, a social service professional working with youth at risk, and a social justice activist. And it's in all those roles that I care what happens to children and youth and the systems that affect their lives. I have lived in Louisville 27 of the last 39 years. The 12 years I lived away, I served as executive director of the Highlander Research and Education Center, which works with people across the South and country to address economic, racial, and social inequities. I heard horror story after horror story of the criminalization of our schools and its disproportionate targeting and impact on youth of color and low-income youth. Louisville added its own story to that growing narrative with the incident of police abuse in Jefferson Town High late last year. I am for safety, but against the use of police as resource officers in our schools. And I say so as a daughter and cousin of family and law enforcement, and as a member of Louisville Showing Up for Racial Justice, standing in coalition with the Kentucky Alliance, Stand Up Sunday Black Lives Matter, Mahente, Dear JCPS, and other organizations. I strongly encourage you to reconsider the multiple contracts that JCPS has with local police and sheriff departments. As documented by various groups, researchers, and academics, evidence shows that police in our schools, rather than making them safer, actually escalate the tension and violence. When you apply a police lens to the behavior of children and youth, then every simple act of misbehaving can be considered criminal. Police powers are pervasive. They can legally use force, arrest, and handcuff for actions that may violate a school rule, but are certainly not criminal acts. The results are alienation, humiliation, stigmatizing, anxiety-producing, and trauma, and leave some youth with criminal charges that follow them the rest of their lives. For decades, politicians, law enforcement, and media have fed a false panic about youth crime in order to justify this targeting of low-income youth of color. It's a beginning step in the school-to-prison pipeline. We can make our schools safer without policing them. If we are truly about protection and creating environments where all children and youth can learn, if we are truly about that mission statement read at the start of this meeting, we need a holistic approach to safety, a school system that would put resources into hiring more staff and teachers and training them up, including restorative justice practices. We need to invest in training youth themselves and growing their own skills in peer-to-peer conflict resolution. Yesterday, the school system was called to task by the Courier-Journal for letting abusers off the hook. We need a new vision and a new way of thinking. What could we all accomplish together if we stood together as a society and said we would no longer tolerate handcuffing a 5-year-old for a tantrum? Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. Our next speaker is Jesus Inez. Jesus. I'm sorry. Welcome and thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you. Good evening, JCPS board members, Superintendent Polio, and staff and community members. My name is Jesus Ibanez, and I'm with Mi Gente Louisville. We're a Latinx organization, and I'm here to express our deep concern over the persistent and worsening violence toward youth, in particular Black and brown youth, because of the increased use of police or school resource officers in our schools. What happened to the Black youth attacked by Jefferson Town Police a couple of months ago is unacceptable and indeed reprehensible in spaces meant to keep youth safe and able to learn. Overwhelmingly, as statistics show us, it is Black and brown youth who are profiled, targeted, abused, and suspended. According to a recent ACLU study titled Bullies in Blue, the presence of police or SROs, rather than decreasing violence, indeed does the opposite. Just as in the broader community, law enforcement in the schools singles out children and youth of color for the harshest punishment, leading to escalated situations in which Black and brown youth pay the highest price, leaving schools no safer. A particular concern to Mi Gente Louisville is the impact these policies have on our immigrant youth. In our schools, families are already feeling targeted by anti-immigrant atmosphere and persecution. Police in our schools only adds to a culture of violence, exclusion, and an attack for immigrant and refugee youth. We're all familiar with the school to prison pipeline, but most of us are unfamiliar with the school to deportation pipeline. And this pipeline is increasingly being supplemented by these SROs. We need a holistic approach to a safety in schools, which includes looking at impact of students of having an incarcerated loved one, facing anti-immigrant discrimination, and perhaps even fearing the impact of ICE, being homeless, low income, and facing the systemic racism prevalent in our society and school system. Over and over again, despite the call from social service workers, families, teachers, and others for more counselors in the schools, an approach of addressing youth concerns, schools are refused these resources and sent more police. We call on you, the school board members who are entrusted to lead, to address this emergency in our schools. Address it now. We will hold you accountable. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, sir, for being here this evening. Our next speaker that is signed up is Mrs. Hagler. Ms. Hagler. Ms. Hagler. Next will be Stephanie Best. Ms. Best. Stephanie Best. Okay. Mr. Raymond Wagner. Mr. Raymond Wagner. Christy Kelly. Christy Kelly. Thank you, Ms. Kelly, for being here tonight.
Thank you all for allowing me to speak. As a teacher and a community advocate, I bravely did what Kentucky Teacher Code of Ethics contract requires of me of reporting physical abuse, verbal abuse, students being threatened by staff members, student isolation, and educational neglect. I have always received high evaluations. My students and parents love me. I have a record of helping students to achieve. Never have I mistreated or abused a student. Never have I neglected a student. Ms. Porter, You asked at the beginning of this meet, or at the beginning of this meeting, you reminded us about Martin Luther King Jr.'s sacrifices. And you asked what inspires you. Well, what inspires me as a teacher is students like Jonathan, who I bravely but positively approached a colleague about threatening. Martin Luther King Jr., Muhammad Ali, and Brady. People like that inspire me. When I see my students who others in society say who can't, and I see them achieve, that is what inspired me. My voice will not be silenced. I was hired to be a teacher, and that's what I do every day, and I do a great job of it. The only thing I expect is for my employer is to treat me the same way that they treat everybody else. There is no way I should receive calls that feel like that it's harassing and pressure just because it makes others feel uncomfortable who is not respecting or adhering to the teacher code of conduct. I do not understand why I am presented with these calls, wanting me to leave the building. And I ask you, if it was your child, and that child said to you, or several students said to you, Miss Kelly, since you've been back, we feel safe. Miss Kelly, since you've been back, no one can touch us unless we touch anybody else. And so I'm asking you all, I don't think that any JCPS employee should have to go through retaliation or harassment for doing their job of reporting student verbal or physical abuse or being threatened. I ask you all to establish a phone line where employees can report it and not have to endure what I have. I thank you, and I look forward to hearing back from you.
Thank you, Ms. Kelly, for being here this evening. Our next speaker is Mr. Tom Moffatt. Mr. Moffatt.
Oh, I don't think I'm going to be up to this anymore. But I said my topic was the importance of
good teachers.
Good teachers teaching, and most of what I know about good teaching has come to me through my very good friend who was just speaking to you. I want to tell you about one of the first times that I realized that she was special. I'd already known her for some years. She had just started substitute teaching after getting her master's degree. And she had gotten a long-term assignment at Mazik, and after 2 or 3 days came to tell me about it. She came into this classroom, which had been taught by a man who had been in the service. The first thing she heard from several of the students was, "We didn't pay any attention to him, we're not going to pay any attention to you." She told them that she was going to be fair but firm, and that they were going to become a family of learners. After that first day, she said she knew that there were 5 students who were the troublemakers. 2 of them were just lazy, and they knew that they could get out of doing their work by appearing to be troublemakers. 2 of them were genuinely learning disabled, needed help. And I forget what the other one was, but she said in the first couple of days, I let those lazy ones know they weren't going to get out of their homework, of their work, their assignment. I was going to stay until they got it done. The ones that really needed help, I brought them up next to me. And by 3 or 4 days, that classroom that had been totally a waste had become a family of learners. I don't know that I can match that, but over and over again, similar things have happened, and she's told me about them. I just hope you will support and encourage and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Moffatt, for being here tonight. Our next speaker is Robin Bellamy. Robin Bellamy. Press the, hi.
Congratulations, Diane Porter.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now, I got with this technique, let me get with this one. I come to you on behalf of, I am an executive board member of the Kentucky Alliance in the Weston and Brayton Center, and as well a Dupont Manual grad and alumni member. I was a bit appalled when I heard the situation with Mr. Mays that went on up there. So I come to you on behalf of that situation. Here we go, here we go. I'm gonna get with it. When you get over 50, that's what happens, you get a little slower. Okay. We at our People's Agenda had this discussion yesterday on Sunday. We were asking that the board to evaluate the entire Dupont Manual Principal Mr. Mays situation, Superintendent, because of the fact how it was handled, of the way we were told, the investigation handled by you, Superintendent. The reprimanding of the principal was nothing but a slap on the hand. He was able to stay in leadership position as we were told. We were heard that he was still able to harass students and the staff. If the board didn't know that we at the KAA, RPR, can verify some continuous situations and harassment through our intake calls that we had in meetings. There were 2 separate reports that were completed, and we had heard nothing, and it was pretty much transparent that we didn't hear anything back of it. We're not happy with the situation with the secrecy, being that if he is being reprimanded, what's being taken in consideration, what's going on with the situation. Those are some of the questions that we had. We need to know that the reprimand for Mr. Mays' behavior was as well what we were saying was the culture and the climate evaluation that was conducted, the reports. Are the staff, the students, are they safe with what's going on? Or is it a continuing thing that's going to go on? As you said earlier, you know, you inspired and you want things to go better with students. So that's what we're looking at. What's going to happen with these students if they're harassed by a principal? Mia being a grad from I won't say what year, but George Sarr was my principal for 4 years, and believe me, he had his way of conduct, but we never had racial slurs, we never had problems with Dupont Manual at that point, and I am a proud alumni member of that school. I want to congratulate those students because I ran track up there as well, but we want to know what's going to go on with the situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for being here tonight. Our next speaker is Mike Nelson. Mike Nelson.
Thanks. Neeson, that's close. Noel.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Am I good?
Yes.
All right. I'm a parent. My sons went to J-Town when you were the principal. Joey graduated USC. Andy's going to graduate UK this year, so I appreciate the help. And we got to talk when we worked together like that. I've also got two nieces that we ended up bringing into our house from a bad situation. I'm here to talk about the TAP program because one of them really affects my older niece, Tara. I guess I'm concerned about the proposal to consolidate the two programs by closing the Westport one and rolling them together, moving those 40 mothers and babies to a different facility, partially just because of the move itself and the distance that'll be. My nephew gets up at 5:30 in the morning, rides the bus all the way over there, at school all day and then back. Adding distance or anything to that scares us, but what I know is that this proposal was made in the past, and at some point, JCPS decided against making that move. I don't know what went into that decision or if any of those factors have changed, but I'm kind of interested to know how all that works, because this just impacts students that are really at-risk students, and students that bring in tow behind them students that will soon be there. And a kid that grows up in a house where his mother was a high school dropout and couldn't finish for all of the barriers that are in place to be a teenage mom, that really puts him triple behind the eight ball. Want to remove all those, and I know that you guys do too. We're just working through a problem here. You understand it far more than I do. I just see the little piece, but I just can't overstate how important it is that these people get their educations and find a way to get it finished. Our story, as she pointed to earlier, was that Tara ran away shortly after she came to us at 16, got pregnant, dropped out of high school, got pregnant, ended up at Home of the Innocents, and stayed there until she had her baby, at which point we brought her back into the house. So that was the 2016-17 school year. With the help of Child Protective Services and Social Services, we tried to contact TAP to get her into the program at that point. We're not able to do so. We came down to these offices twice to try and get in. We're told there was no room. So when we finally get into the program, we were shocked to find out they were looking for us the whole time, saying we can't fill these seats. And I guess what I'm saying is, I know as important as this thing is, you got to weigh, is it better to close a facility, or is it more important to build a bridge to try and fill the desks more than they are? And that's a ding, so thanks.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Barbara Boyd. Ms. Boyd.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Congratulations on your appointment as chairwoman, and Lisa continuing as vice chair. My name is Barbara Boyd, and I am a retired JCPS teacher, was appointed to 2 terms on the Education Professional Standards Board by Governor Brashear, and I was elected and served 2 terms as a regional director for JCTA, as well as being a member of GLASB, CASB, NASB, and I currently chair the Kentucky Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression. The day our voices become silent on things that matter is when the quality of life as we see it ceases. I'm here on behalf of the JCPS teacher that just spoke before Mr. Moffatt, who the Kentucky Alliance believes is experiencing retaliation because she stands up for her students. The way our district is handling students with behavior challenges cannot continue to go on like this, because you are truly operating a school to prison pipeline type institution for those students who cannot fight for themselves. Assistant Superintendent Polio, Acting Superintendent Polio, you have talked to this teacher and co-signed that she was doing the right thing to report verbal and physical abuse of students when it's observed. I remind you that an educator has an ethical duty to report when verbal and physical abuse of students occur. There is a whistleblower law, and also retaliation is prohibited. No one shall retaliate against an employee or student because she or he submits a grievance which she believes to be true. We are educators, and as a retired educator, I am an educator. And our children come into the school with a lot of problems. And if they have a disability that's protected by IDEA, those kids need to be protected, and they cannot be treated as if they are criminals. They are operating at a disability, and it's up to educators to advocate on their behalf, and that's what Ms. Kelly did. And we expect you to look into it, let the Kentucky Alliance know, what's going on, because she is a good teacher. She's there for her children, and we need hundreds more like her.
Thank you, Ms. Boyd, for being here tonight. Our last speaker, no, not our last one. Our next speaker is Edith Yarborough. Ms. Yarborough. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I want to first of all congratulate, of course, you, Chairperson Porter, and also Vice Chair Lisa Wilner, as well as the board on having this New Year meeting, along with just being the working board that you are and being the open and receptive board that you are. Also, as well, interim Marty Polio. So I want to thank you for that, because we really do appreciate your hard work. But today I'm here to speak actually on the inclement weather policy. As you all know, we went through a really severely deep freeze last week. And I guess a lot of teachers probably were expecting to be off, maybe. I know a lot of parents and students where I live were expecting to be off. In fact, in the morning times, actually, I live in the eastern part of Jefferson County, and about 5:30 in the morning, I drive to the western part of Louisville, it's Shawnee neighborhood, to attend prayer service. So I get the opportunity to see children on the bus. I get the opportunity to see sometimes parents waiting there. And in my neighborhoods, of course, often I see cars with parents with their kids inside. Very seldom do you see that same type of circumstance in the Weston. You usually see kids huddled together. So I think as we begin to look at this cold weather situation, I'm not really sure what the absolute policy is. I guess my concern was that Fayette County was out on Friday, and yet we went to school on Friday, January the 5th. And it's interesting because if you listen to the Facebook chatter, everyone's asking, what's going on with Jefferson County? Why aren't we out today? Or why isn't there a delay today? So I'm hoping that we will review our policy. I don't know what exactly the policy is, but I will look at it. But I do hope that frequently we take a review of it. And when we do that, I'm hoping also that we will ask community members to be a part of it. That would be awesome. So I'm here tonight just asking that we take a look at that. And particularly when we think about children standing out, or actually when I went downtown, there were very few children standing out. And honestly, today I ran into 2 DOS students. They were seniors applying for jobs at Pizza Hut, because that's where I was. And they gave you a thumbs up, Marty Polio. But they were not happy with the inclement weather, I'm being honest. So actually, I asked the student if she was able to make two girls, 2 females, I asked if they were able to make it to school. And one said she missed 3 days out of the 5. One student missed 1 day out of the 5. Okay? So I don't know what attendance looked like. I'm sure you examined that. But I'm hopeful that we'll review that. And to me, a delay is better, absolutely, than a day off. But in that kind of circumstances, we really do need to look at kids all around the county. Thank you.
Thank you for being here tonight. That concludes our speakers. I just want to do a quick check according to my list. That concludes the speakers. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to move on there. Our next item on the agenda is action items. We do not have an action item for this evening. The next item is information item. And at this time, we have asked our general counsel to share some information with you as a point of information. Frank? Oh, sorry. Okay. The next item is the acceptance of the quarterly report for 2017-18 Head Start, Early Head Start Corrective Action Plan. Dr. Polio.
Thank you. As we have done, I believe this is our second quarterly report on our Head Start Corrective Action Plan. So I'd like to bring our team to the table to update us on the work that is taking place with corrective action concerning Head Start, and then we'll take any questions from board members. I'll turn it over to Dr. Coleman.
Yeah, so you're right. This is our second report. And I just, before you know, of course, Rena and Felicia, I just want to say publicly that the attention and time that has been dedicated to this report and to this corrective action plan has been just amazing. We even got something from Head Start. I think it was it Thanksgiving Day? And Rena responded like that. I mean, it has been, she inherited a real challenge when she stepped into that role, and she has just been amazing. We still have work to do, but we've put lots of structures and systems in place that I believe will make a real difference for our kids. So, Rena?
Thank you. Good evening. I just wanted to say, first of all, that we understand how serious this corrective action is, as do you. And by the way, we appreciate this full support and engagement of the Board of Education, our Policy Council, and our district leadership, starting with Acting Superintendent Polio, because without that, we couldn't move forward with the great strides that we've had in 3.5 months. So we took this piece of not so great news, the report, Office of Head Start report, as an opportunity to create systems where there were none and to strengthen current systems, to increase substantially the levels of support for our staff and our students and families, and to also increase the levels of accountability. And most importantly, to move beyond the compliance piece towards really striving for quality and excellence, because that's what we are about in JCPS and in JCPS Early Childhood. And so those guiding principles have really set the stage for the development and the implementation of the corrective action plan. If you will recall, there were 3 specific areas: the standards of conduct, active supervision, and timely reporting. Those were the 3 areas that the Office of Head Start asked us to fix or improve upon. And I will just highlight for you a few things from the corrective action plan that we've moved forward with that we think are pretty significant. So number 1 is we have significantly ramped up our policies within our department on safety and wellness, on positive child-adult interactions, on professional standards of conduct, and active supervision, and child abuse reporting, of course. We've also embedded the Head Start standards and into district protocols. So outside of our department, across different departments within JCPS, from discipline and management to health services to nutrition to human resources to safety. We have improved those communication protocols that allow us to report in a timely manner. We have trained, in-service training, pre-service, onboarding, and continuous training throughout the year on those very topics. We have really improved the day-to-day practices so that when you walk into an early childhood classroom right now, you need to ask them how many kids are in their room, and they should be able to tell you immediately at every single moment of the day, how many kids and how many adults. That's a big part of active supervision, along with several other things like zoning and scanning and all those things. So we've also really, you as a board have been engaged in governance training along with our policy council. We have developed a triage menu and process that allows us to respond in a timely manner in terms of student and family safety and wellness needs, and we've operationalized that. We've expanded a mental health contract with the University of Louisville School of Social Work to respond to more students and classrooms. We've collaborated with mental health service providers to have therapeutic care on site in our locations, in our centers. And we are beginning training with families on addressing the effects of toxic stress and adverse childhood experiences. We have completely revamped the way that we provide coaching support. We've gathered baseline data, and we're providing differentiated supports to classrooms depending on the needs in that classroom. And we have trained principals and center administrators, and even assistant superintendents have been engaged with us on walks into early childhood classrooms. So we have done a lot of things, and we know we have a lot more things to do. So I'd like to just briefly share some of the upcoming strategies that we look forward to in the next few months. We would like to work on selecting and adopting a socio-emotional curriculum for the whole program, providing training on the foundations of early childhood education for all our principals and center administrators, with a partnership with New Teacher Center, and developing online modules for principals and other leadership, developing and conducting leadership rounds as administrators and calibrating our expectations. And of course, we've talked about the work of moving towards centers as a big step in that process as well. Are there any questions?
Ms. Duncan?
Rena, you get very high marks from many of your people who are working with you. I want you to know that. I've heard that when in the center, in places where I've gone, and they've talked about you. So your people appreciate the work that you're doing. How do we know? I mean, I hear all the things that we're doing, but how do we know they're making a difference? Is there any record of offenses or anything that we can kind of latch onto and say, well, this has really gone down, or this is not existing anymore? Or are you keeping records like that? So.
Yes. Part of the corrective action plan is tracking. We have a tracking system for both student support and staff support. So in situations where we have incidents, what is the follow-up support that is being provided, the necessary training or retraining that is being provided, as well as the administrative actions that need to be taken if necessary. But yes, we are tracking all of that, and be happy to provide the board with those updates as well on a monthly basis, I think.
That's on your weekly packet.
Are you seeing anything that's saying, wow, this is making a difference right now?
I would say it's a qualified yes. I believe that we are seeing definitely a heightened awareness, and therefore the reports that we're seeing sometimes are not of the kind and level that we used to see, and even not of the frequency that we used to see. It's even slowed down from the beginning of the year. Now, having said that, one, it's going to take a while to right the ship and change the system. This is a process. And so we're continuing to work on that, but we are seeing definitely some positive from the data.
Are you seeing more principal engagement in terms of monitoring what's going on?
Yes, absolutely. And what I want to say is that this work has absolutely been teamwork. I thank you for your kind words, but this has absolutely been teamwork from the very top and all the way down to the school administrators and the staff at the school that have been very supportive and have become more engaged and really realized the importance of all of this. So.
Well, I know of the principals that I have spoken to about this, they have just like reached out and owned this
Yes.
now. I mean, the ones that I have spoken to, and I'm sure that's true all across the system. But thank you so much for your work on this, and we're all encouraged and hopeful that all of this is moving in a much better direction for us. And thank you for that.
That is the goal. Thank you.
Ms. Horne and then Dr. Wilner.
I also just want to thank the team for all this diligence to try to take all of these items and report back on where you are, and it's a good thing. In a smaller district, obviously we'd be sitting around a little table and we'd be doing this in a different way, so it feels a little awkward, I must say. But in my governance training, it was good training, I must say. It was lengthy, hours and hours, just on one day, but it was an all-day training. And what I learned is, we've got management, it's kind of a policy council, and then the governance, and we're the board for Head Start. And there were kind of in that role as kind of a board member for Head Start, I would like to try to publicly receive just kind of what I would normally receive as a board member of any board. Just the basics of just a one-page written report from our director, from you. I would like to see the budget and where we are for the year, just kind of the treasurer's report. And I would like to see, the regular report we get for all of the schools be included for Head Start, so we could see the attendance and the teachers and the students. We could see any incidents and what type of behavior they were, the trending, so we can follow that month to month and year to year eventually. And so I would like to see that not in a Friday weekly report where the public doesn't see that I'm providing diligent oversight as a board member of Head Start. I'd like to get it. It could be on a consent agenda item where I can pull it out if I had any questions. But the board, the public can see me on a monthly basis, get that information. So really, I think you could do that. The minutes from Policy Council could be just included.
Yes. Actually, point of order. We already currently share Policy Council minutes with the monthly financials, and I believe Anji has all of that information that's accessible to all the board members. But if you want to receive it in another way, absolutely.
I just want to receive it in a public meeting so that I can, if there was a question, I can publicly, so it's just on a consent agenda monthly. It's just a regular item. Because I just feel like as I have to, in my governance role, I can't just have this like becoming in a Friday report where the public doesn't get to see my oversight, that the national leaders of Head Start don't get to see the diligent work that our board is doing. Because like you said, we are doing it, but we need to show the public that we are doing that. And they can read it, and they have good ideas too, that we can hear back from them. So that would be my request. And then the idea of the required seats, because we are a board made up of elected board members, that Head Start governance training identified certain seats that needed to be held. And I just wanted to just check in maybe next month that we are in compliance. And if we're not, what we're going to do, the steps we're going to take to get into compliance with our required roles that we learned about in the governance training.
Yes. Yes, we will provide that information to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you again for all your hard work.
Dr. Wilner.
Thank you very much for the report and for the hard work that I know is going on. Two questions, and the first question is when the Federal Head Start folks were here, that first meeting, and we met in here, one of the discussions was that these are really hard jobs. These are really tough jobs, the folks that do the early childhood, the classroom assistants and so forth. And so high stress, high demands, high focus the entire time they're at work. And I know one of the things that the board had talked about was providing more support for the staff, better training, better support for them to be able to take a step back, take a time out if they need to. So can you just say a little bit about how we're supporting the early childhood staff?
Sure. One of the things that I think Head Start has been very receptive to is that we've developed, piloted, and then refined what we call a tap-out system, a tap-out and step-away system, being able to step away within the classroom and also to tap out of the classroom, and then for the administrator to be engaged and provide supports, assess the situation, and work together with a staff member in order to address whatever the triggers are to support the staff. So that is something that we will be training on January 24th, I believe, all our staff, and after we piloted it. And also on January 19th, we are receiving, our coaches and resource teachers, counselors are receiving training on trauma-informed self-care. And then we will roll that training back out in February to our entire staff. So those are just two of the pieces that we're currently working on.
Good, wonderful, thank you. And the second piece, and it may be too early, have you had any kind of feedback yet from the folks at Federal Head Start? And maybe is there a tidbit or two you could share with us about that?
Well, we've had communication with Captain Bob. I try to update him on progress, on strategies that we've begun implementing, and he's been complimentary of for example, we had training on addressing, dealing with challenging behaviors in young children. What are the appropriate strategies, positive strategies? And he has really appreciated that work, and so he continues to give us feedback on the work that we're doing.
Are there any additional questions? Okay, at this time, is there a motion to receive the quarterly report for the 2017-18 Head Start, Early Head Start Corrective Action Plan? Motion by Ms. Horne, second by Board Member Duncan. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your hard work. We will never underestimate the hard work that has gone into what you do every day.
Thank you. Thanks, Rena.
Our next item is the overview of draft budget for fiscal year 2018-19, school allocations and enrollment projections. Dr. Polio.
Thank you, Chair Porter. We are bringing up the team to give us an overview of the draft budget that we will be voting on at a subsequent meeting. We wanted to give you time to have that information first with our school allocations and enrollment projections. So I think Cordelia's up first, so turn it over to her.
Thank you. We have several items to actually cover briefly with you. We won't go into detail in a lot of them, but the school allocation is the first piece that we are going to go through, and it will be an overview of the changes of the allocation formula. It will include the allocation standards that we will ask you for approval actually next board meeting, and then also the draft enrollment projections that Dr. Dina Dossett and Ralph handle, and we use that in our budgeting process. So We want to start with the allocation formula. One thing I want to let you know is that no school will be negatively impacted by these proposed changes for the 2018-19 based on our current projections. The clicker. I won't read this to you because you've had the opportunity to do so, but we're basically restoring the funding levels of our priorities. We're making some adjustments for, in particular, one of the major changes we're making is to provide new lower school tiers. That is to account for, should we have some smaller schools come in on the elementary, middle, and high level, as well as on the high, we're looking at those schools that are at a larger enrollment. So we're going to make those changes in this proposal. We're also providing funding for all the elementary students to have access to music and arts education. We have discussed that with you prior to this previously. All of our school reductions are being fully restored also in this process. The elementary assistant principal, until this 18-19 school year, it's actually been considered an add-on, and what we are proposing is to actually make it a permanent piece, at least for this 18-19, as part of the allocation formula itself. This is a recap of what the school allocation proposal will cost as far as an increased cost. And again, we went over this previously, so I won't go into a lot of details there. And then our next steps are to present to you all next meeting for actual approval of the revised allocation standards and the approval of projections. And schools will actually receive their allocations on February the 5th. So you've, in the board agenda item, we've included the new standards that actually gives you the details that you could read over. And Dr. Dossett has provided also to you all the 5-year enrollment projections, as well as enrollment for this next year by school. So in case you have any questions on this piece.
Questions, Ms. Horne?
On the elementary school 0 to 250, are there any schools that are in that allocation category?
No, at this time there is not any.
Why do we have that category? Because it's like, if there's nobody in it, because it seems like the split in the middle school and high school, there's like a category between the two.
Actually, prior to the projections, we did have one school that may have fallen into there, which was Alex R. Kennedy, but with the projections now, they are in that next tier. One of the other pieces that we are looking at is, of course, we have charter schools that are coming, and we know that the charter schools, at this point, the legislation could be 100 students as far as a minimum, and we're doing different programs even within our public schools. So we want to make sure that the allocations that we're providing are consistent with what is truly needed for those smaller schools and something that we can afford as a district.
Now, why isn't there the break like for middle and high school? Why isn't there that, you know, between 0 and 250, and then it jumps all the way from 250 to 6 versus in the middle school? There's a middle category in between those two.
Typically, we have not found that in middle school and high schools that there would be that level of students. So this was just a recommendation as we were looking through what our schools exist today, what would be appropriate break.
But what I'm asking is, you do it for middle, you do it, but you don't do it for elementary. Why don't you do, why isn't there, there's a middle category for middle schools, like there's a 400, or, you know, 250 to, you know, in between that, the 250 to 600, there's a further breakdown. I just kind of wonder why we don't do that for elementary, what the rationale is.
Well, we could certainly do that, but one of the things that we wanted to make sure we were not penalizing any school that we had now and make sure that the allocations fit to what the needs were of the schools and what they have expressed to us as far as their needs. And John, would you?
I'm just kind of wondering, because it seems different between like a school that would have like 200 and some versus a school that has 600 and some. You'd think there'd be a greater need if you had that many more children, but there's no difference.
So, one of the objectives in setting the lower tiers was to do exactly as we've stated, and that is to accommodate smaller enrollments. We feel like we've done that without damaging any allocations already received by the schools in existence. So that was one of the things that we were leery of, aware of, and sensitive to ensure that the tiers that we were establishing were, for lack of a better word, sustaining the existing allocations to schools that were already in the system.
Other questions? Okay.
The next piece we have is the draft budget overview. As you all are aware, the draft budget is the very beginning of our process for 18-19. It's very preliminary at this point, and we will submit, of course, the tentative budget to you in May, and then the working budget will come forward in September. Again, I won't read the information. You've had that opportunity, but we've made certain assumptions within the budget, and there's really no major changes, but on the next slide is where we have talked about some of our revenue assumptions. We have assumed that the property values will continue to rise at a 4% increase. We've assumed that the board will levy a property tax rate that will generate a 4% gain in revenue. Our occupational taxes, we are assuming that the economy is going to stay healthy, and so therefore we've projected a 4.3% increase. We also know if our property assessment values increase, then unless the state drastically increases the per pupil base, we know that our SEEK, state support, will actually decrease. And there are the three items actually that will cause an impact on that state. One of the things we have is 1,100 fewer kindergarten students, and that has to do with the age change. And it's even going to make a bigger impact in 1920 because those kindergarten children will then become first graders. In kindergarten, for our average daily attendance that is part of our SEEK funding, kindergartners are only counted for half day, even though we have full day programs. We're only funded for a half day. However, when they move through the system, they will, in first grade, be at basically the same level of numbers of children, but yet they will then be counted as a full day, which will impact the fact that we have lower enrollment. And that will proceed all the way through the projections. And if you looked at the projections that Ralph and Dina have put together on a 5-year projection, you'll see how those counts actually move through each year. The flat SEEK base, we won't know what that is until the April when the legislature completes their actions. And then the state, again, SEEK decreases whenever property values increase. The next slide, this is just to give you an idea of the experience we have with the accuracy of the revenue budget. The actual accuracy comes within the working budget, and that's when we know what the tax rates are going to be that you, the board, have levied, and the property tax assessments. This next slide you have seen many times and is just a trend. It lets you again explain our main source of revenue increases have been the property taxes, local support. This shows you that the occupational taxes are still increasing, although they're not as robust as what they have been in following the recession. But every economic indicator that we see, it appears that we still have a healthy economy. Our current expense assumptions within the budget, we have assumed that there will be steps. We have not assumed any cost of living increases. That does not mean that this board will not do that. It's just that's not our assumption at this point. We have assumed, and we feel confident, that the CERS cost, that is the classified retirement system for support staff, that cost will increase approximately $17 million. We have already received what we know the new rate is going to be, and so that will definitely increase. And as a side note, when we increase taxes, if the board elects to get the additional 4% revenue, that equates typically to about $16 million. So the $16 million that we received in property tax revenue will be taken up with the CERS increase in cost. KTRS at this point, as far as we understand, the rate will stay the same, the employer rate. Just a side note, this is not an expenditure that we used to have, but starting in 2010 and 11, it has gradually increased as a district expense, and it is now projected to be about $18 million. Last year, it was $16 million. We've restored the school allocations that we had reduced previously, and the art and music, the Du Bois Academy is included in this, and we have budgeted for 20 new ECE teachers. One of the issues here is there are an increase, according to our ECE department, we have approximately 200 more students that have been identified, many of those with autism, and therefore we need to have ECE teachers available to provide those services. There are no new grant rescues within this budget. That does not mean that we will not have them come the tentative as we see what the state and the feds are happening. Here what we have attempted to do is kind of give you a high overview of what we expect the 18-19 budget to be at this point. Again, this is very preliminary. We start with a revenue of $1.1 billion, and that is the general fund, is what we're including here only. At this time, we do not have grant funds in the draft budget. Our expenses with the contingency is $1.2 billion. And so when we take contingency out of there, because that's basically kind of the difference between our fund balance, for lack of other terms, that the state requires us to budget for it, but we take it out because it's not a true expense. So our expense subtotal is $1,117,000. So when you subtract that from our revenue, then we are looking at a $10 million deficit. However, we do know that we have some anticipated savings in reimbursements to the tune of close to $12 million that will offset that. So the bottom line comes, at this point, we're looking at a surplus of $1.2 million. This next slide shows you where we expect the reimbursements to come forward and any savings. We have E-rate, that's $553,000. We've assumed $10 million on vacancy credit. That comes from vacancies within the teaching staff as well as custodial staff. We've seen quite a bit of vacancy there at times, and instructional support staff even. It comes from actual vacancies as well as a timing of when an employee leaves and a new person is hired, and also the salary differences in some cases of when a retired employee leaves, and typically a person replacing would be paid probably less because of the service years of credit. This next slide is to give you kind of the update of where we are right now. In 17-18, we're projecting a $2.8 million deficit. This does take into consideration our expected savings, such as our vacancy credit. Next slide is strictly a review of the fund balance usage and the projection that we have. And then an indication on the next as far as the makeup of our general fund balances and how it's been over historical. And that is that presentation. Is any questions?
Questions? Mr. Geese?
As we begin to hear in the wider political world about dips in the SEEK formula, potential tax credits, I want to know if your office has given any potential thought to that, and should those things come to fruition, how your office will address those potential future shortcomings.
The concerns that we have, we are watching the legislative items that are going forward substantially. One of the issues that is being brought forward is a tax credit, which we are, and the board is of the same stance. We feel that individuals and corporations can currently take a deduction for donations to a district, public school system like ours, or 501c3s like our foundation. We do not feel that the credit, the actual credit, should be something that's allowed because I personally feel that it is against public school funding. So we do watch that carefully. Anything in the legislature that impacts funding, I make sure that I'm looking at it close, and I communicate that with our legislative group and the superintendent so that he is aware and everyone knows what impact it could possibly have on our district.
Ms. Duncan?
And I would urge all of us, I think in response to a message that we received from KSBA, to support to encourage our lawmakers not to support the tax credit for scholarships to private schools. And I went ahead and sent my message in last night, and I would encourage all of us to do that. Watch these alerts because they do make a difference to our legislators. They do pay attention to when we speak up, and I would encourage all of us to do that, to watch those.
Yes.
Fund balance.
Yes.
It didn't register on me what our fund balance is at this point, and do you have that?
Right
here?
now, I believe it's 152 million. That includes like obligations, inventories, that type of thing. But right now, last year we had a surplus of approximately 22 million, and therefore it increased substantially.
Very good. Thank you.
Other questions? Dr. Kolb?
Could you go back, I think it's like 8 slides or so, to the JCPS general fund revenue trends? Keep going. There, that one. So on this one, I really just kind of want to draw our attention to the fact that, if you look at the purple line, which is state SEEK revenue, it's basically flat, which, over the course of 10 years, if you factor in inflation, means it's gone down significantly in real dollars. Likewise, the other non-local sources of revenue are the ones that are so low on the graph that they barely register. The other state, I believe it is, and the federal revenue. So if we're going to be able to meet the needs that we have financially, it's clear that we're going to have to do it locally. Those other federal and state lines are not trending in a positive direction for us. And then if you could go to the next slide real quick, so that there's the numbers essentially for the graph we just saw. So if my calculations are correct, if you look at SEEK, other state, and then federal, which are the 3 lines on the bottom right above total, I think the figure is since 15-16 school year, in sum, that funding has declined almost 10%. I came up with 9.5%. So again, it's, as you said, we've got more children with autism. We've got to educate, we need more ECE teachers. These are things that we have to do and want to do as a public school district, is educate every child no matter the challenges they have. And to go back to the discussion I think we had at our last meeting before the end of the new year, or maybe the meeting before that, about other sources of revenue. I mean, to me, just speaking personally, this really adds some urgency to the fact that if we're going to educate our kids here locally, which is what we are charged with doing as elected representatives, we just don't have a choice but to seek other local revenues. So I just wanted to draw attention to, and that's not even, mentioning the $17 million in SERS that you mentioned, or the KTRS that's gradually gone up since 10 and 11. The only other kind of question, or I don't know if it's I guess it is a question, is on the savings on the unused salary budget. That's so, on the one hand, it's like savings, yes, that's great. But on the other hand, vacancy, no, that's not good. So, I mean, I guess my question is like, how do we feel about that? I mean, is it the sort of thing where it's like, okay, well, I guess it's sort of nice that it's there, but ideally it actually wouldn't be there?
Right.
Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, and we monitor that monthly to kind of see how the trend is going. And one thing, so we can budget and kind of forecast what we expect our vacancy credit to be at the end of the year. But yes, we're allocating those salaries, those positions, and there's different reasons why they may not be filled. Part of it could be, like I said, a timing difference. Some of it could be the decisions that the school is making for whatever reason.
Yeah. Okay.
There can be always a gap. It can be a vacancy, but sometimes if there's a vacancy and there's a hiring process, it might be 6 to 8 weeks from the last time a person works until the next person steps in, which would be nearly 2 months of vacancy credit in there. So, that's not ideal either, but sometimes that happens.
Understood. And then just finally, to conclude on the point that Ms. Horne raised and then Member Gies raised on the scholarship tax credits, I know a lot of folks have probably seen, I think it was in the Washington Post, the article that summarized the latest research into scholarship tax credits, and found that when students took advantage of scholarship tax credits to go from public to private schools, that their academic performance actually declined, in some cases pretty significantly. So, it might be a debatable supposition if academic performance increased greatly, but the fact that academic performance actually declines when states enable scholarship tax credits is pretty worrisome. And I worry a little bit that maybe some of our state legislators don't necessarily have all that information. I know they've got a lot on their minds and many different issues to look into. So I would encourage everybody to, when you call repeatedly, your state legislators, to draw their attention to that fact. And a simple Google search should turn that article up for you.
Mr. Brady.
Thank you, Chair Porter. Also, to piggyback on that same subject, I have 3 points, but the first of which is this subject about the proposals that are before the Kentucky legislature, specifically to let you know we're talking about SB 36 and HB 134. Those do provide the scholarship tax credit scheme. The idea behind that, though, is at a time when we're being told that there's not enough money to provide adequate SEEK funding, we're also opening up a loop, or not a loophole, but a hole in the bucket, if you will, that's going to drain funds directly from public schools. Statewide, in the first year, we're talking about a hole of about $25 million. Within about years 5 through or 6, we're talking about, because this builds up, we're talking about a $76 million hole for public education throughout the state. Specifically, as regarding Member Duncan's request for not just us at the board, but you and the public to contact your state legislators. I am kind of curious to know if any analysis has been done specifically to what that means to us here at JCPS locally. I understand that may be difficult to calculate, but it'd be interesting to have that figure. It'll be nice to be able to tell our local legislators, because they have to answer to constituencies here locally, what that impact might actually be within the city. So that's point number one. So take that, and you don't have to respond, but just want to bring that up. Secondly, point number 2 will be going back to slide number 9 where you currently are located right now. And what I specifically want to talk about here is the E-rate reimbursement. I could be wrong, and I thought I remember seeing at some point that due to some of the budgeting that's been going on and I guess interesting ways of doing government in Washington, D.C., that E-rate could be in jeopardy as far as the funding that goes to this district. I know that we have funding that's levels that are listed all the way out, obviously to 2018-19. I don't know what the future holds. No one does, but I am kind of curious, or at least if you're aware of this, to make the rest of the board aware of how those types of changes may actually affect what we're looking at here regarding some of this, our sources of general fund savings.
It definitely could decrease. We used to be receiving approximately I think at the highest point was $1.8 million in E-rate, and it has gradually, because of the changes at the Fed level, has decreased as far as what qualifies and what they do support. So we do expect that to go down, but I do not have any indication right now that the $553,000 that we are projecting is not something that we would receive.
Okay, and obviously I know that you don't know what the future holds. Neither do I.
Right.
So, but it is something that for the rest of the board members to be aware that this is something that is not exactly a rock solid source of income, and it can very easily disappear, as we've seen with school textbook reimbursements or declining funding for friskies within our school. Something else, last thing I want to discuss, and this really isn't necessarily addressed within this this budget by name, but we did talk about it a little bit earlier, was deeper learning. And my understanding is that we're looking at allocating, according to what I saw on JCPS Twitter yesterday, $836,000. Good job for communicating that, by the way, Communications Department. For deeper learning, I had a conversation where someone was asking me and kind of reminding me, actually, of some of the conversations we had, I believe, earlier in last year. It sounds strange saying that now, in 17, where we, under different leadership, we had our past chief academic officer and past superintendent come before the board, and at the time we were talking about $400,000 for funding for deeper learning, if memory serves. And I know some of the questions that this board was asked was that an adequate amount? Obviously, it looks like we have a little bit more here, but and at the time, the CAO and the superintendent, who have both changed since that time, were supposed to come back to us with a report and to tell us how effective that would be, and if that was really effective, that was an effective amount or appropriate amount, and how that can be scaled up. Obviously, I don't recall getting a response back to that because those folks aren't here. I am kind of curious to know, this could be Dr. Polio's response, it could be your response, it could be academics' response, but when we're looking at this $836,000, this is going to be for 21 schools for deeper learning. Is that an adequate amount? Is that something we also need to possibly be gearing up a little bit more for too?
It's not even close to enough to do what we want to do. But having said that, to be mid-year and to provide grant opportunities for schools, I mean, we could only do so much. But we felt positive about the fact that we were able to double that original amount of money that was given to deeper learning. So as we build this backpack model, it is going to require significant infrastructure, especially with technology, so that schools have better access to Chromebooks, the websites, the web, all kinds of things that they're going to need, plus different types of spaces in schools. And so that's what we're seeing right now for schools and what they're going to need. So I think as we move forward, if we're going to stay committed to that principle, and especially this belief of students' backpack and success skills, we're going to have to ramp that up as we move forward.
In the past, implementation has been always kind of a challenge for the administration in this district. I feel more confident about that within the last year. But I just also want to put it out there for public knowledge that, yes, we have a recommitment and even a doubling of funds. But again, just to say it is not really enough to really, truly go as far as we would like to go. And with that, coupled with possibility of tax credits, possibility of losing E-rate funding, and any number of other things that may or may not come out of Washington, D.C. or Frankfurt. And also talking about the fact that any increase, because we have to go to a maximum of 4%. If we go over 4%, then we have to, that's a ballot initiative, and that also has a possibility of costing the district even more money. Then we're limited by that. So, you know, we might take a look at what you saw in another work session earlier, looking at different forms of raising revenue that really wouldn't be necessarily limited to $17 million or $16 million, where all that's eaten up immediately by pensions. But just want to throw that out there as an informational point, not just to my fellow board members, but also to the public as well. So thank you.
Well, also regarding deeper learning, I believe when we present the tentative budget, when we start bringing those items forward to you all, you will see that there is more. Dr. Coleman has worked strongly within the academics division to increase that deeper learning. This $836,000 is just an initial impact that we are making, but there's a lot more to come.
Great, thank you.
The next, what we have is really just informational, some trend information that you all had, different ones had asked for before. I won't go over it unless there is some question, but it is our revenue as far as enrollment trends. And one of the things I wanted to point out is when you look at the revenue as it deals with average daily attendance, SEEK is what is really impacted through that. So next slide there, John. This is where we've got the revenue and SEEK and how it relates to average daily attendance. And so if you look at the next slide, I've actually put the two together. Where you look at total revenue, you can see it's really not a comparison. SEEK is the area where we deal with on, it impacts. If we could, and I know that's difficult, but if we could increase our average daily attendance by 1%, that is an additional $3.5 million to this district. So attendance is extremely important, not just for funding, but to get the child there that can't learn if they're not in school. Okay.
Board Member Horne.
I totally agree. I'm really hopeful. I know we've talked about this before, about looking at some point in doing a citywide, a countywide attendance, get to school campaign. It is such an integral part of our budget and could make such a difference, just moving the needle, and it does pay for itself, anything, effort that you would have to put out. There are communities, I know that our JCPS management is on this, and I think it's really, if you look at the trend data with this, it's really, our attendance is down, even though our enrollment is, stagnant. One of the questions that I have on another note, when I am out and about in schools and also just in my regular real estate work life, I know that there are about 2,000 homes in the area that have already been approved in the newer areas outside the Gene Snyder and around Middletown. And I'm really looking at what I'm seeing in this report, and it just, I guess, are we saying that kids aren't going to public school, or are all those in the demographics? You know what I mean? Are they in there?
Before you answer that question, would you give us a little bit of history about in the past, and I don't know what the current statement is, but previously when we looked at home ownership, I guess there was a formula, Ralph, that you used as it pertained to how many children are projected to live in a property, because if I were to build a home at this time, I would not have any children going to school. So would you, in answering the question, would you all speak to that, please?
Sure. Well, and I'll turn it over to Ralph quickly, but these projections that we provided, again, were a first draft. You'll see a final version on the 23rd of January. You do see a little bit of an increase in enrollment over the next, projected over the next 5 years, but not the 2,000, and that has to do with again, housing patterns and the idea that the fact that 70% of residents in Jefferson County don't have school-aged children. And so I think you have to account for that when you're looking at housing patterns as well. But I'll let Ralph explain a little bit around the history.
Well, just to say that, yes, Ms. Porter, we've known for a long time that there's pretty much those ratios in play. We know that given that the price of a new home, we can fairly determine how many kids we get from each price range of house. So we've got a good idea when we see growth coming online. We know the prices of the houses. We basically know how many kids that development will yield. So, and yes, they are in the demographics. We do know that the southeast and the northeast areas are still the highest growth areas of the county outside of Gene Snyder. The Billtown Road area being the fastest growing, but also Brownsboro Road still showing some good growth. That's where a lot of our growth is still coming from.
I just want to make sure that I reiterate, I'm concerned, about the daily attendance, our attendance rates. I'm concerned about the demographics, not, planning for enough kids in the areas of this growth. And the bottom line is I can see private schools springing up all around me, and they are being filled because the people that are telling me, my constituents, are saying that they don't have a seat in our public schools. So as new subdivisions come up, there's one that's going to be right next to Crosby with 200 homes, and the houses are built for families. So I'm just really concerned where the kids in those homes, if they have middle school age kids, are going to go to school.
So I think that's something that we'll have to look at in both our facilities committee as well as our student assignment committee long term. So that's something that both committees will have to work together to address. In terms of projections and the impact of projections, there's really 3 ways that those projections have an impact and can be altered. One is boundary changes. So if you change the boundary, then you can change the projections into a school. Magnet acceptance. So if you have a magnet program and you can reduce the number of acceptance, and that will change your projections. And then also building renovations and facilities. And so, again, those are the 3 main ways in which projections would be impacted in terms of individual schools. And as our student assignment committee and our facilities committee move forward, then that's when we'll need to address long-term needs across the county.
I just have a couple of comments to make before we call for the vote. One of which is we talk about allocations to schools. I want to be assured as we move forward that we're putting money where the need is for some of our schools. I know that when a school is declared priority, although we don't use that word anymore, there was some funding that came along with that. But there are also schools that are not priority, that are on the edge, that need the additional dollars. So not at this moment, but I would like to be assured, particularly at the elementary school level and for any school that is borderline could go to a since we don't call it a certain status where they need additional help, that we are in fact making sure that the money is there for them to be successful, as opposed, and if money is not there initially, I would like to clearly understand how we get it to them before day 1 of school, and it's not an application process where staff or principals have to wait before they can staff their schools efficiently based on the needs, if we are truly working to improve academic performance of our students. That was one of the things that I had. And the other thing that I had was as we talk about funding for the various components of what the district is about, for example, deeper learning, we're talking about the dollars that are going to that. I would like for the board to be assured that for the other projects or capital or activities that the various departments are sponsoring, that the money is there for that also, because as we give to one, we do the same thing with schools. We don't want to take away from, and we want to meet the needs of every program that we said that we are moving forward with. So not for this moment, but those are a couple of the concerns that I have, that we're taking care of the schools that need the extra dollars, and that if each chief has programs that they are working toward that will help us as a district, that the dollars are there to support the work that they need to do. Those are the only two comments that I have.
Well, I can assure the board that one of the priorities that we have is looking at the priority schools, previous terminology, plus those schools that we call that are on the edge. And we do want to make sure we are supporting them, as well as all schools, to make sure they're being supported. We also are in the process, we start actually tomorrow, Superintendent Polio and I, along with each cabinet member, will be going over current budgets and then kind of some expectations for the next year. And we take a look at what their needs are and how they're using their funding here in central office. We hope through that process we can find some efficiencies so that we will identify some funds that, and even if it's $10,000 out of one unit or $2,000, every bit that we can centrally identify, then that's more than we can put towards support directly to impact students. So that is a process that we're working on, to have individual meetings, but I assure you the priority schools, the schools of need, are definitely what we are making sure are not negatively impacted.
Okay, thank you so much. At this time, is there a motion to approve the overdraft of the draft budget? Ms. Horne, second. Board Member Duncan, all those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you so much for your work and for your explanations to us. We always seem to have one more question, so thank you everyone at the table for helping us with the questions. I want us once again to be mindful of our times, saying to you that we are getting ready to go to the next item under information items and next to the consent calendar, again to remind us that we are going to have an executive session at the end of this meeting, brief executive session, but I want us to stay focused on that and be mindful of maybe our words, if there's a nice way of saying that, but getting our questions answered properly. So the next item on the agenda is to look at, to get information about the superintendent search status update. And for that, we're going to go to our General Counsel, Frank Mellon. Thank you, Mr. Mellon.
Thank you, Chair Porter. The Board of Education has received 9 applications from candidates interested in serving as the superintendent through a nationally advertised application process that was completed on December 1st. The Superintendent Screening Committee, whose role is to provide recommendations to the members of the board, held an organizational meeting in November and held meetings on December 8th, December 20, and January 8th to review candidate applications and to make preparations for interviews of candidates. The Superintendent Screening Committee has communicated to the Board of Education that of the 9 completed applications received for superintendent, the Screening Committee has narrowed the candidates to 2. Independently of the Screening Committee, the Board of Education has narrowed the list of 9 applicants to the same 2 individuals. Given this widespread consensus among these 13 different people representing a wide range of community voices, the Board of Education believes that the most transparent and productive course of action is to reveal the names of the 2 finalists at this time. Those 2 individuals are Dr. Marty Polio, the acting superintendent of JCPS, and Dr. Mike Racer, the chief operations officer of JCPS. The Board of Education has contracted with the Louisville public relations firm, Vandy Carroll Hellage, to solicit substantial community feedback that will help the board when it interviews the finalists and makes its decision. The board will interview the 2 finalists after receiving this feedback from Bandy Carroll Hellich, which it expects to receive by February 15th. Bandy Carroll Hellich has already conducted a number of internal focus groups within the JCPS community. There were a total of 11 focus groups, each group made up of 6 to 8 people, including parents and employee groups. In addition, Bandy Carroll Hellich will be meeting with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee during the first week in February to receive student feedback. Further, the board will ask Bandy Carroll Hellich to conduct a number of community forums throughout the city so that the community will have several opportunities to ask questions of the 2 candidates. Specific information about the dates and locations of the community forums will be forthcoming soon. In addition, there will be an online survey on the JCPS website that all members of the community can respond to. The survey will be available in 5 languages, and it should be on the website next week. The board expects to make its final decision with respect to appointment of the superintendent by March 1st.
Any additional comments? I don't think that we need to go to questions, but are there any additional comments? And I apologize that the sound was not as strong as it should be at the beginning, but I think everyone got the information. I would ask that, working with communications, that we get this posted immediately to the website so people can see that tonight and tomorrow. Some information that they don't have to search for, something that's just going to pop up so that they are aware of what the announcement is tonight based on the recommendation of the screening committee and the consensus of the board that it has been narrowed to 2 finalists. And tonight we did name those 2 finalists. So I want to say this again. I think everybody heard, but I want to make sure that everyone is aware that our 2 finalists currently, as we move forward, are Dr. Marty Polio and Dr. Michael Razor. And I'm not going to go through the whole piece again. I'm only doing that because the sound was not as loud, I think, as I could see some people almost straining their ears. So any other comments? Do we have to vote to accept this information? Okay, so we have received the information. Thank you so much, Mr. Mellon, for the update. Thank you, board, for as we move forward on this. And the next thing we're going to move on the agenda is the consent calendar. Are there any items on the consent calendar that need to be pulled down at this time? Mr. Brady?
I do want to discuss item X briefly.
Item S, which is pertains.
X as in Xavier, as in X-Men, X-ray, xylophone.
XYZ, or are we talking about the civics exam? Is that, okay. Dr. Kolb.
I'd like to pull item L, specifically contract number 2, only contract number 2 on item L.
Any other items? Ms. Duncan?
I also had a question about X, but I would like to briefly say something about W, our policies, and double Z.
W, and after W you said?
Double Z, the 2 Z, the ZZ.
There's no ZZ.
Oh, it's the one concerning, oh, maybe that was what it was. It was the one concerning the policy in regard to the cabinet and the letter from the Cabinet of Human and Family Services.
Okay.
Was that AA? Oh, whoops, sorry.
So for the items that we're being pulled down, is anyone requesting a separate vote on any of these items so we can move the agenda forward?
I request a separate vote on item L.
Okay, Mr. Brady, are you requesting a separate vote? Ms. Duncan, are you requesting a separate vote?
No.
So let's get the questions answered about those that don't require separate votes so we can go on and do the vote, and then we will have the conversation about what Dr. Kolb pulled down with contract number 2. Mr. Brady with item W.
Item X.
X, I keep giving you something you're not asking for. I do apologize.
It's okay.
The civics exam, Mr. Brady.
Just quick questions, and this could be answered by Dr. Polio or Dr. Coleman. I know it's submitted by Dr. Coleman, and in some ways it's also a policy question that Mr. Lowe can answer as well. But just real quick, this has to concern with a new civic exam that was part of the state legislature passing this past year, where high school graduates are required to pass a United States citizenship and immigration services test. I'm just kind of curious as to when this, if other than high school graduates, is anyone who seeks elected office required to take this test?
Not that I'm aware of. No, I don't think so.
That's a shame. That's all I have to say about that, because we keep putting a lot of things on our students' plates, and I think that we get more bang for the buck if we actually require that test of those who want to serve in public office. I think it's more needed there. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Ms. Duncan, you had a couple of items that, I'm sorry, did you have something on that also? And then the couple of items that you had that you say you don't want a separate vote, if we could tacking on to Mr. Brady, and then the other items. And Mr. Geese, I see you've got your hand up as well. Do you want something on this topic also, the civics?
Yes, I do.
Okay, let's
And my question on the civics was, what curriculum, is there a decision about the curriculum that will be addressed and the students will be exposed to before the test? I mean, the law was they have to pass a civics test. Well, what about the curriculum? How do we account for that?
To my knowledge, it's all based upon the curriculum that's already, it is not new curriculum standards. So that throughout the social studies curriculum especially, it should already be taught from our freshman class, social studies class, through world and United States history should all be taught. And then if schools want to offer a senior elective that is approved by the Kentucky Department of Education to support, they can do that. But all of these standards are currently in our curriculum.
Okay, very good.
Mr. Geese.
Just a quick comment concerning Member Brady's comment. While I certainly understand your sentiment, I feel as if I would be letting part of my constituency down, but also my profession as a civics and U.S. history teacher, if I did not say that the civics test is something that is needed. It is not an additional tack on, in my opinion. If we look at math and science, a part of STEM education, which is routinely, I would say, highlighted at the expense of social sciences and social studies education, both of those are highly tested areas. I believe part of the pushback from Kentucky's social studies teachers, as embodied in the Kentucky Council for the Social Studies, was quite simply the fact that social studies under the first version of Senate Bill 1, 2016 through 2017, would reinforce testing and assessments for math and science while taking away an exam for civics and United States history. We all know that when it comes to the plate of a principal and the weight of a school's reputation, if math and science are being assessed, math and science will get all of our attention and resources, speaking practically. Should we not evaluate social studies, we jeopardize the future civic knowledge of our students as citizens and future voters and future elected representatives. I do recognize your point, although I see it as ill-founded.
Point of clarification.
Mr. Brady, point of clarification, and then what? Just a second.
Sorry.
After your point of clarification, we're going to Ms. Duncan to take care of the things that she wants to, and then we're going to vote. Mr. Brady.
Point of clarification on this: no one's disputing the fact that social studies is important, especially even the testing of it, or even this test. My point is that what's good for the geese is good for the gander. So that is the end all and be all of that. I think that if elected officials are going to add more stuff to an already busy senior year, then they should be able to be required to take this test as well.
Ms. Duncan.
In this particular group of policies that we have, we also make references in here to policies that we don't have a lot of changes to, but I think sometimes we're not aware of the policies, or the fact that policies are based on law, and law requires certain things. from us, and these, some of these have to do with laws that are broken during the school day and under school grounds, on school grounds, and those kind of situations. So I know this one section, KRS 158, 155, school personnel who know or have reasonable cause to believe that a violation of state law involving the carrying, possession, or use of a deadly weapon, the use, possession, or sale of controlled substances, or any felony offense has occurred on school premises or within 1,000 feet of school premises, on a school bus, or at a school-sponsored event shall promptly make a report, and that was the school personnel, shall promptly make a report to the appropriate law enforcement agency as required by KRS 158.155. And there are whole sections in here that repeat the law violations that sometimes do occur at school, that do make it necessary for us to take every precaution that we can to allow law enforcement people to handle these kinds of violations. But there's this one section needs an addition on it, and I just caught it. And I wanted to share this with you. It says, any student who threatens, assaults, batters, or causes another student, who abuses another student shall be subject to appropriate disciplinary action, including suspension or expulsion. Procedures for dealing with aggressive or assaultive behavior and the resulting consequences shall be set out in the Code of Acceptable Behavior and Discipline. We don't call it that, and I think as far as it's our policy, or this relates to us and our policies, we need to add a section on there, and I don't know if Jonathan is available here.
Excuse me, Ms. Duncan, do you need us to pull this and bring it back, or do you need us to vote on it? Because
I think we can vote on it. It's
okay.
Because we need to add what we call it, because we
Okay.
don't call it the code.
So we're not going to comment on it. We're going to do what she's suggesting, and then you're going to bring it back to the board if that's possible, please. But that's what you're asking for, that we make it realistic to what's going on in this district so that's accurate. Is that correct?
Right, that's right.
Okay.
But it's what we do, what we call it, and we don't call it this.
Okay.
So we need to change it to what we call it.
Okay.
And the other part of the policies that we're looking at have to do with political expression and religious expression. And I think for me, it's a point of confusion because it says students, and our legislature meant for students to be given the freedom to express themselves politically or religiously in school, during school. They would not be stopped from that as long as it did not disrupt the learning environment. But for me, the question becomes then when a shirt that contains a political expression or allows a student to express himself politically inspires somebody else to disrupt or be disruptive or have a disruptive response to that, who's at fault? The shirt or the person who's reacting to the shirt? And I think I don't know how much we deal with this. We probably don't deal very much with it, but I do think it's something we need to think about. Somebody said, the suggestion was for him to cover the shirt up. Well, if you cover the shirt up, you've taken away his political expression. So, who's the one, we need to think about who's the one here that needs the attention. If somebody can't wear a shirt that has that expression on it, without somebody else reacting to it, what do we do? And I just think, that's part of our policy. We're going to have it in there, and I think we might run into some cases here, because I know some students are wearing political shirts in buildings, and I know nobody has complained about it, but I think it's an issue we need to look at. And then, did you want me to go to ZZ? I'm sorry, AA.
We're going to vote on AA, right? We're not asking for a separate vote.
No.
Okay, so if you could.
Yeah, just quickly on
Yes,
this
ma'am.
one. This one is change that requires a letter from the Cabinet of Human and Family Services for every applicant, employee, and student teacher in the district to have a letter saying that there is no issue regarding child abuse or neglect in that person's background, and it is to be done by July 1st, 2018. Now, my question was originally, did this actually refer to all of our employees or just to applicants from this point on? But I think it was cleared up that it applies to everybody who is working for us and student teachers who are working for us. And my question is, are we going to be able to do this by July 2018 so that all of our employees are able to get a hold of letters? Is somebody explaining how that's going to be done?
To my knowledge, there's a backup already at the state, so I don't see that getting done by July 1st. So I think our goal was to have the paperwork filed on every person for that check, and that would satisfy then the requirement of the state.
Not necessarily that they would have the letter, but they would have
filed the necessary paperwork, and then once they get the response, then submit it to the district.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay, at this time, I would like to entertain a motion to vote on all items of the consent calendar except item L2, which is contract number 2. Is there a motion to accept everything else in the consent calendar? Board Member Geese and seconded by Board Member Horne. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Dr. Kolb.
So contract 2 on item L is a contract with the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department for $324,000 for, I believe, 17 school resource officers. I just have a few questions and points. Sorry, let me flip to the right page here. So on just a kind of point of information question on page 2 of the contract itself under Article 5, it says the contractor shall appoint one person who shall be responsible for reporting to the board. I was just wondering, who is this specifically? Do we know?
Mike, do we have that person? Stan Mullins.
Okay, thank you. And then on, is Stan, is he then our contract administrator?
Contact administrator via school division.
I'm
talking about the same sentence?
No, I'm sorry. I'm on page 5 under Article 13. Steph's whispering in my ear that it's Cordelia. Cordelia is raising her hand. Okay, so that's Cordelia. Thank you. It's okay. And then on pages 4 and 5 of the agreement, not of the contract, but of the agreement, one of the things I think we saw pretty clearly in the J-Town case is that this part about the SRO not being a school disciplinarian, and that the principal being the one to contact the SRO if law enforcement action is needed. And then it states the SRO will take law enforcement action for all felonies and any acts of extreme violence and sexual assault, child abuse, and illicit drug activity. I guess my question is, we had an instance there, and I know there are a lot of factors going into that, where it seems pretty clear to me that the police officer in the school was not following, at least in the spirit, if not the letter of the agreement. What are we doing to ensure that these 17 LMPD SROs understand what it means that they are not a school disciplinarian?
So, as a result of our investigation that we brought back with recommendations that were specific at the time to the J-Town incident, but related to all school resource officers, was to have increased training for our officers and our administrators, so they know that, and to have some work on unifying exactly what would be incidents that school resource officers would get involved with and would not get involved with. We are currently working on an additional MOU, as we said in the press conference, that we will be bringing to you in the next month, that we're going to be asking these partners to agree to, that will spell out specifically as an MOU really an understanding of what that means more specifically. And we are working on that now and plan to have that we would want to be consistent amongst all 4 of the agencies that we would bring back, and hopefully they would agree to, and we hope they will, to continue on with the contract.
And this is, and I apologize if I missed this in the press conference, but on that same topic, more or less, on page 5, when it addresses SRO temporary replacements, so, you know, the training requirements are fairly minimal.
Correct.
You know, so is this addressed in the MOU, or will it be addressed in the MOU?
It will be, yes. We are looking to remove the 50% language that's, I believe, in some, I can't.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
The acts, but
yeah.
Of the hours, we are looking to increase the hours. So yes, that's going to be a part of the MOU, because I agree, it's, we need additional training.
And second to last question is, so it states that the SROs will participate in the restorative justice program when requested by the Jefferson County Attorney's Office. I'm wondering, and again, maybe I missed this, maybe it's in the MOU, shouldn't we have the power as well to request restorative justice in addition to Jefferson County Attorney's Office?
I think you'll see that in the MOU.
Okay,
Yeah.
fantastic.
No problem.
And I know in his RP training, required RP training, I know Dr. Zeitz has indicated we are training SROs, but is that going to be spelled out as a requirement?
Yes, it is, along with de-escalation, which we added that to this contract because we hadn't had the investigation, but as a result, when we were working on this, we wanted to add de-escalation, but we are going to specify a little bit more specifically, working with them, what specific training we will be requesting.
Okay. And I just intend to vote against this until, we have that MOU language. And it sounds promising, what's coming forward, and I really look forward to getting it. I'm not comfortable under this current agreement. Like I said, I like where we're going, but don't like what's all here.
Understand.
Okay, is there a motion to approve the this particular consent calendar, item number 2, as for the professional services contracts of $5,000 or more? Ms. Horne, seconded by Board Member Brady. All those in favor of approving this, please raise your hand. Okay, those opposed? Dr. Kolb, all those in favor were Ms. Duncan, Mr. Geese, Ms. Horne, Mr. Brady, Dr. Wilner, Porter, and opposed, Dr. Kolb. Thank you so much. Moving on with the agenda, please. We are now down to the board planning calendar. Is there any urgent discussion about the planning calendar? Board Member Geese?
Yes, just in regards to the planning calendar, I was reviewing my notes from this time last year in preparing for the first half of our board work for 2018. The only thing that I noticed missing in terms of yearly discussion is our update concerning the Bellarmine Literacy Project. Wondering when we can get that update, whether that be later on this month in January or in February. Just wondering when we could see that update.
Okay, Dr. Polio?
I think we can get that on the first one in February. I think that would give us enough time to prepare that. Can you get that on, Jonathan? Thank you.
Anything else on the planning calendar? Dr. Kolb?
I just have a point of clarification on February 27th. It says recommendation for approval of race and equity board policy. On the March 27th, we have a work session on equity and race board policy. And then on April 24th, we have approval of race and equity board policy. I'm just wondering, is that first recommendation on February 27th, is that like a first reading, or why are we doing the work session after?
That actually is in error.
Okay.
Essentially, what we're doing is moving it back to continue the conversation within the ad hoc subcommittee and then to the board policy committee.
Okay.
And so we're giving ourselves just a little bit more time to do that. So that first one on February 27th
Should be deleted.
should be deleted.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about the planning calendar? Is there a motion to approve the planning calendar and to add the things that have been requested? Mr. Brady, seconded by Mr. Geese. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Committee reports. Any committee reports at this time? Hearing none, we will move on to board reports. Are there board reports that can be somewhat brief at this hour? Okay, Dr. Wilner and then Dr. Kolb.
I'll cut out most of what I was going to say, but I'll just talk about the Leadership Louisville event today. 4 of the board, all of us were invited, 4 of us were able to be there and speak with the new Leadership Louisville class. Dr. Dossett is a member of that class. And so they toured schools today. Some of them had never set foot in a JCPS school before. And they had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Polio earlier, I think with Dr. Marshall, and then with board members this afternoon. And we then were in groups with them, just in a circle, one board member with a group of folks. And one of the questions that was asked in my group was, how do you, they were so impressed with what they saw in the schools, and they said, how do you change the perception of our schools? And I said, well, you tell me, how was your perception changed today? And we went around the group, and each person in the group had an opportunity to say something. And so one gentleman whose child went actually, I believe, to private school, is an engineering student at university, and said, I wish I had known about this engineering program at Moore, that she would have been so much better prepared for college and the engineering program. Somebody else said that their child goes to a pricey private elementary school. They visited Okolona Elementary School and said that everything they're doing at Okolona, there was nothing better at the private school than what they saw at Okolona Elementary School today. So to a person, every single person who spoke in my group were surprised by the high level of learning. Another thing that was mentioned, how concerned every staff member was, every teacher, every classified staff, every principal, about the people in the building, making sure that they felt that they belonged there. Even staff making arrangements at one school, a child who didn't have transportation to school, staff working out, getting the child to school that day. So the folks were really impressed, and these stories don't get out there. And I said, so now you're all ambassadors for Jefferson County Public Schools. Please share what you saw, share your experiences, share what you observed. And it was quite wonderful to hear those stories and those testimonies from today.
Dr. Kolb?
I just want to brag that I already filled out the JCPS annual survey and remind everybody to do so.
Thank you. Other board reports? Okay, I will save mine for the next meeting in the interest of time. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of the board work as it pertains to climate, and to show that we are in fact partnering with our acting superintendent with the culture and climate, but I will save it in the interest of time. Remember, I said I'm giving it in the interest of time at the next meeting, so don't look at me and say, why are you doing that? Because in the interest of time, I'm not doing it right now. So having said that, we will move on. Let's see, do we have to, we don't have to accept the board reports? No, we don't have to accept those, so we will move on. There is a need for an executive session, and at this time, the board will now conduct a closed session as permitted by KRS 61.8101C of the Kentucky Open Meetings Act for the purpose of discussions of pending litigation against the board. Is there a motion? Mr. Geese, seconded by Dr. Kolb. All those in favor? It's unanimous. We will adjourn to the executive session. We will be in the first floor conference room right behind us. Please take 5 minutes for a quick break if you need to do so.